Hello, and welcome to the Those Dweebs podcast, where we have a little bit of everything for everyone. Let's roll the d20 of fate and see what we are talking about today. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode. I want to go ahead and say thank you for everyone who's been listening so far and supporting this podcast. We actually got to our, the goal of 500 downloads, which, is astounding to me. It really, honestly, and truly means so much to me. And I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. It's hard to believe that we are already on the 12th episode, and yeah. Another little notification to clear would be that there are, over on our YouTube channel, we are slowly getting back into posting videos. There should be a new one up that Michelle did, where she was unboxing her newest and latest mermaid tail. And it would mean a whole lot to us if y'all would go over and check that out. There should be a few smaller form, videos coming out, so. Fortunately, no long form with our investigations yet, but hopefully with getting a new computer, we are going to be able to jump back into getting those done for you. It just might not be until potentially sometime in December to the beginning of next year, which I'm so excited for. I miss editing the ghost hunting videos. They make me so happy, especially whenever I'm able to catch all the fun activity that we got in those videos. But without further ado, I will quit rambling and tell you what we're touching on today, and that would be The Ghost of Chicago, the Windy City's Most Famous Haunts by Adam Selzer. I'm going to be picking out a few of these and reading them just like I have in the past, and we shall go from there. So, buckle in, cover up because the weather's getting a little chillier, and grab your favorite beverage because we are getting right into this one. Hello everyone, I wanted to come on here real quick and preference that this episode does contain talks of murder, violence, and suicide. So if any of those are uncomfortable or things that could cause a trigger for you, please feel free to skip this episode. For everyone else, let's get into this. The first one we're starting with is the Congress Hotel, located at 520 South Michigan Avenue. It's safe to estimate that more people have died at the Congress than at any other local hotel. Once known as the Auditorium Annex and now officially known as the Congress Plaza, over the years it has hosted everyone from refugees to stars, from gangsters to presidents, and more than a couple are said to have stuck around. One side effect of working in the ghost hunting or ghost busting industry is that no matter how hard you try to be level-headed and rational, you are still likely to get articles written about you that make you look like a nut. In 2006, I found myself the subject of a very amusing tabloid article that described me as a courageous ghost hunter who had dedicated his life to exposing the horrifying entities haunting the mean streets of Chicago. I've been called worse, I guess. The article went on to describe a night in the Congress Hotel when I was chased down the 12th floor hallway by a malevolent spirit. Other people who were present that night contend that I screamed like a little girl. The truth is that I had gone up to the 12th floor to check on some equipment that was set up there before. That was set up there. And when I returned to the elevator, I felt an overwhelming sensation that something was behind me. I ran to the elevator and wouldn't look back for anything. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But I'm certainly not the first person ever to be scared on the 12th floor of the Congress. There are some types of buildings that just always seem to be haunted. For instance, you never hear of an abandoned mental hospital that isn't supposed to be haunted by former inmates. In larger cities, there are two types of buildings that seem especially prone to haunts: theaters and hotels. Most of the theater stories are pretty easy to explain. Old theaters are full of creaks and noises and open spaces that can play tricks on your mind. And anyway, if you ask the average theater person to tell you a ghost story, they will do it. Hotels have the same creaks and noises, but if you do enough research, you'll probably find half a dozen or so deaths associated with any given older one. Usually, it'll be a handful of people who died of natural causes, a couple of suicides, and perhaps a murder or two. At the Congress Hotel on South Michigan Avenue, I found the names of dozens of people who died in their rooms, in the lobby, or in the tunnel that once connected the hotel to the auditorium theater across the street. It's only rarely, when I have a very small group, that I can take them inside of the hotel these days. But it's always a memorable stop when I can. The place was built in 1893 to accommodate visitors who came for the World's Fair, and it retains a bit of its vintage elegance. It is, in fact, one of those old buildings that seems as though it ought to be haunted as soon as you step inside. There are lots of nonsense stories about the place circulating around, that Al Capone used to own it, or the serial killer H.H. Holmes used to stalk victims there, or that Stephen King based his story 1408 on a sealed-off room. I get asked about them a lot, but the Capone and Holmes thing are flatly untrue. And I don't know anything about any sealed-off room that Stephen King thing seems to have grown out of an older myth that room 666 was sealed off. In reality, there were offices where room 666 would have been. There are plenty of stories I can verify, though, and naturally I prefer to focus on those. A dark and splendid history. By the 1930s, the Congress Hotel was world famous. Presidents stayed there frequently, as did movie stars, opera singers, and gangsters. You can still download radio broadcasts of Benny Goodman playing in the ballrooms. But while all old hotels have played host to a handful of deaths, the Congress seems to have played host to many more than its share. Most of them were old people dying of natural causes, though some of those deaths were fairly notable. For instance, G.H. Palin, the sloganer who coined the phrase "safety first," died there. And then there have been a number of bloodier deaths. In 1908, there was an attempted murder-suicide involving a love triangle just outside of the front door. A husband and wife, shot by the wife's jealous lover, reconciled as they lay bleeding on the sidewalk. The wife's name was Ruby. Oh my goodness, okay. Pishak. Pishak? Yeah, Pishak. Newspapers couldn't resist commenting on the ruby red blood of Ruby Pishak. Woo! Doing good, guys. And headlines. She survived and wound up divorcing her husband after all. Damn, after all that, she still divorced him. Also in 1908, a ballroom in the Congress was frequented by a man named Roy Gormley, who spent money like a sailor on shore leave, indeed. He seemed to be trying to run himself broke, and as it's turned out, he was. One night, Roy offered the orchestra leader $500 if they would play the Death March by Saul, a tune perhaps best known for being played when soldiers are buried at sea. The orchestra leader said they didn't know it, so Roy hummed it. They must have managed an acceptable rendition because Roy gave them the money and bought a round of drinks for the orchestra, plus another round to be delivered the next week. Then, having finally spent his last dollar, Roy retired to his room where he committed suicide. In the 1920s, at least one man died there of drinking poison moonshine. Even a danger in words are hard, guys. The Prohibition era, when several gangsters lived in a well-appointed suite. I'm going to read that line again. When several gangsters lived in well-appointed suites at the hotel. Theodore Roosevelt, who is sometimes said to haunt the place, didn't die in the building, but from a certain point of view, his career did. It was in the Florentine Room that he announced in 1912 that he was leaving the Republican Party to run as the candidate of the Progressive Party, better known as the Bull Moose Party. In one of the most remarkable campaigns in American history, he had managed to beat William Howard Taft, the incumbent Republican president, in the primaries. But when in that era of less democratic political conventions, Roosevelt didn't win the party's nomination, he decided to form a new party. In the November election, however, he lost in a four-way race to Woodrow Wilson, and Roosevelt never held elective office again. The north wing of the hotel is from 1893, and the south wing was constructed in 1902 and 1907, around the time the name was changed to the Congress from the Auditorium Annex. Part of the new construction included the massive ballroom known as the Gold Room, which was the first ballroom in the city to be air-conditioned. That and the Florentine Room are the oldest ballrooms left today. Many others, like the Elizabethan Room and the Pompeian Room, have vanished so thoroughly that no one at the hotel even seems to know where they were anymore. Indeed, the hotel itself is sort of a ghost story today. A surviving relic of an era when all of the classy people went to hotels to hang out, and the performers in the ballroom were the biggest talents in America. but plenty of regular kinds of ghosts get reported there as well. Ghosts are known to appear right at the entrance. There's one that's variously known as Twinties Man or the Gangster Man. He sometimes appears right in the front hallway in an overcoat and a fedora, and appears to be a guy from the 1920s. He's also been seen on the second floor. He doesn't say much, but seems to appear and disappear. One woman on my tour recently described walking into the hotel and noticing the man standing there as she tried to find her elevator. Then turned her head and he was gone. When she mentioned that to a doorman, he asked her, was it that guy from the 1920s? We see him now and again. One thing frequently seen in online reviews of the hotel is that the TVs turn themselves on and off at random. This drives the engineering staff nuts. They've tried to replace wiring and to replace the TVs, but nothing works. Some guards blame the phenomenon on the ghost of the judge, one of the last elderly people to move into the hotel permanently. In his declining years, he acquired a remote control that worked on the TVs in the hotel rooms and would amuse himself by sitting outside the rooms, turning guest TVs on and off, or off and on, from the hallway. Some say that the TVs turning themselves on and off now is just the ghost of the judge up to his old tricks again, like a regular little rascal. That's so funny. I mean, just to have first off, an elderly old man just getting this remote in order to just completely fuck with people and turn on and off TVs from outside a room would be so infuriating and so funny at the same time. But the fact that he continued it in death, oh my goodness, that tickled me. Okay. The shadow guy and the little boy. At times when I was able to get groups in regularly, I got to know the security staff pretty well, and they kept me abreast of paranormal developments. Just recently, a security guard told me that they'd received a call from a man saying that a ghost, he was sure, was moving around in his closet. "Will you look inside the closet and see if there's anything there now, sir?" the security asked. "Hell no," the guy replied. But by the time security arrived to find nothing in the closet, the man had packed up and was in the hall, ready to move to another room, if not another hotel. Other guests have reported a shadowy figure that is said to appear mainly to people associated with the military, according to several employees. It once scared a room full of Marines so badly that they rushed to the lobby in their underwear and refused to go back. Given the military connection, it's been speculated that this may be the ghost of the first man to die violently in the hotel, Captain Louis Ostium. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of these names, by the way. A U.S. Army officer who was found in his room with a bullet wound in his temple in 1900. Ostium had recently returned from the Spanish-American War and was suffering from night terrors, really violent nightmares from which he would wake up screaming, probably a result of post-traumatic stress disorder. His friends believed that he had awakened and shot himself in the midst of a nightmare before becoming conscious enough to realize that it was all a dream, though it could always have been cold feet as well. He was to be married the next day. I've been in plenty of places where we saw mysterious, human-esque shadows zipping by, and they aren't really all that scary. When you see one, you think, hey, there goes one. How about that? This one, however, seems to be scary enough to frighten people out of their rooms. Could it be that the terror in his brain that led Captain Ostium to shoot himself lingers along with his shadow? But the most tragic Congress Hotel story of all is that of the little boy whose ghost is seen on the top floor of the north wing. Some have also seen a little girl, of course, leading me to wonder if it may be the ghost of Donald and Zudel Stoddard, a brother and sister who perished in the Iroquois Theater fire, trying to find their mother, who was waiting for them at the Congress. But as sightings of the boy are far more common than reports of the girl, I tend to tell people that the most likely identity for the ghost is Karel Langer, who was 6 years old when he died, and assume that the ghostly little girl is probably an exaggeration, not a ghost that anyone actually sees. In 1908, the Langer family fled their hometown of Prague when Hitler took over Czechoslovakia. They had to sell their factory and mansion they owned for next to nothing, and wound up living in a basement in Humboldt Park on the west side of Chicago. The mother of the family, Adele, was driven to madness, it was said, by the persecution she and her family had suffered, both in Prague and in Chicago, at the hands of hostile German Chicagoans. The fear that she was going to be sent back to Czechoslovakia when their visa expired weighed heavily on her mind as well, and she seems to have suffered a nervous breakdown. In a fit of what was determined to be temporary insanity, she checked into the Congress Hotel with her sons, Karel, who was 6, and Jan, who was 4, in early August 1939, and asked for a room on the top floor, the 12th. There she threw both boys out of the window before jumping out herself. All 3 died. Ghost hunters don't agree on much, but one thing that many believe is that a lack of commemoration will lead to more ghost sightings. The next day, photos of Adele and Jan, the 4-year-old, appeared in many newspapers, but there was no picture of Karel. Perhaps that's why he stuck around. I hadn't yet heard the story of him when I felt like I was being chased down the hallway. In any case, every security guard I've spoken to agrees that the 12th floor is pretty creepy at night. One even told me that he once stood stock still at the end of the hallway and watched the other end grow farther and farther away. That's some like Shining shit right there. Oh my god. The Gold Room. The ballroom known as the Gold Room is sometimes said to be haunted by the ghost of a man with a peg leg. I'm not making that up. Someone might have, but it sure wasn't me. When I first assisted on an investigation of the place, security told us that they had recently received several reports from customers saying that a homeless man with a peg leg was lying around in the hallway. They would go to run the guy off and find no trace of him. Some reports, which I've never been able to verify independently, state that a hobo with a peg leg was murdered in the hotel in the 1920s. Initially, the hotel workers told us this was on the 7th floor in the south wing, but one guard told me that he'd shown up in the gold room as well. The gold room is the most impressive of the ballrooms that remain in the hotel today. A real throwback to the days where hotel ballrooms were really something. A few ghosts get reported there. Some people have told stories of a bride and groom walking around the balcony, and some have sworn they'd heard an orchestra tuning up there in the middle of the night. But most of the ghostly activity on the second floor seems to take place around the ballroom, not in it. One guard told me that the ovens in the nearby kitchen have been known to turn themselves on, despite the fact that they aren't supposed to be connected to anything anymore. On one occasion, and only one, I saw strange colored lights dancing about on the ceiling in the lobby outside the ballroom. Boop. There we go. The Florentine Room. But as spooky as the Gold Room can seem in the dark, ground zero for ghostly activity in the Congress Hotel is without question the Florentine Ballroom. Some longtime security guards have refused even to go near the place. Step into the Florentine Room and you'll probably immediately notice that the atmosphere there is markedly different from the atmosphere in the Gold Room. Or on some nights, it's absolutely terrifying just to walk into the room. Even on nights when it doesn't make the hair stand up on end on the back of one's neck, the old wooden floors creak as you walk across it, and the series of Florentine-style paintings on the arched ceiling seem to be telling some sort of story that you can't quite comprehend. It was here that Theodore Roosevelt made his grand announcement that he was leaving the GOP, which was no longer radical enough for him, and had been careless enough to renominate Taft instead of him to lead the Bull Moose Party in 1912. He never held elective office again and is sometimes said to haunt the place. A photo of a mysterious silhouette was taken in 2008. It seems to show a stout man standing upright in a Roosevelt-like posture. And then, on the next page, the author had taken a picture. Unfortunately, I can't show that, but it's really cool, actually. But he goes on to say, I'm standing to the left of it in the shot. I like to imagine that it's a picture of me with Colonel Roosevelt. One night after seeing a TV show about era cues, the practice of playing music from a ghost era to see if the music could persuade the ghost to show up, one tour customer asked me what sort of music they played at the Teddy Roosevelt rallies held in the ballroom. I agreed that trying an era cue might be fun, so before turning the lights on, I wandered to the piano and picked out a rough version of Battle Hymn of the Republic, the 1912 Bull Moose campaign theme song, using single soprano notes that echoed through the darkened hallways. Nothing unusual happened, but it sounded so deliciously spooky that I decided to do it every chance I got. And so every time I was in the room after that, I would play a few bars of the song, usually leaving off in the middle of a line. Most of the time, nothing happened, but on 2 occasions, as I walked away, there was a distinct sound of another piano note in the air. One time, there was a stray baritone note that rang out while I was plucking at the keys on the other end of the scale. Stories of phantom music in the room are fairly common. Many guards say they've heard music coming from the room. One specifically said or mentioned calliope music, which he theorized was from the room's stint in the roller skating rink. Others talk about hearing a guy humming in there, which makes me think of Roy Gormley, the guy who hummed the Death March for the orchestra before ending his life. The Phantom Gunshot. The most famous story of the ballroom, however, has become the story of the Phantom Gunshot. Now, it's no secret that the hotel was once a favorite of gangsters. Al Capone never owned the place, but he certainly spent some time there. His gang even held a guy hostage there for a while. In the days before the gangs really started fighting in the mid-1920s, members of nearly every gang in town were living there, more or less in peace. Tony Ginna of the terrible Ginna brothers had $100 per night suite, quite a sum in the 1920s money. Vinny, the schemer, Drucci, sorry about that, whose gang would soon wipe out the Ginna brothers, lived there around the same time. According to legend, there was once a mob murder in the service hallway that runs alongside the Florentine ballroom. Whether this is true or not is totally unknown. When gangsters kill each other in service hallways, they don't exactly fill out paperwork that you can dig up at the library later. But one night, we thought we heard the ghostly sounds of gunshots coming from the hallway. Here's what I wrote on the Chicago Unbelievable blog at the time. Shortly after we wandered into the darkened ballroom, I felt as spooked as I've ever been in that room. Enough so that I quietly broke out a keychain to try Hector's pendulum trick, at which I normally scoff. Suddenly, there was a huge blam coming from one of the service hallways off to the side. I honestly thought someone had fired a gun at us. There were no footsteps following it, no screams, no sound of a body hitting the ground. And when we opened the door to the hallway, no one was there. We spent the next several minutes scouring the area, trying to see if there was any way to explain the gunshot sound. There were some people who thought they detected some movement in the door to the hall itself, as though it had been cracked ever so slightly ajar, then shut at the same time of the sound. But there wasn't nearly enough movement to cause anything like the sound we had heard. Even when we slammed the door, it sounded more like a door slamming than a gunshot. The slight movement could have just been impact from the force of the noise, which again was really loud. When we ventured out, I went down to the office and spoke to security, saying, "Okay guys, nice one. How did you do it?" They insisted that they hadn't faked us out and showed me logs indicating that no guard had been on the floor at the time. Over the next year or so, we heard the gunshot again a handful of times, and caught a security guard in the act of faking it at least once by setting off a firecracker and hiding it in a locked closet. However, the firecracker was a different sound than the gunshot. These days, now that some time has passed, I'd say that odds are pretty good that they set it up every time. But I had to give them credit for this one. They certainly scared the heck out of us. And I sure can't prove it was them the first time. Nor can I explain how they could have made all of the loud sounds we heard in there. Some of them actually came from the ceiling and seemed loud enough that they would have broken right through it if they were just stomping on the roof. If you go, union members on the hotel staff were on strike for 10 long years, so I never recommended actually staying there. Though I had no moral qualms about just popping in to look at the hotel stuff and use the bathroom. But the strike ended in May 2013, so there's no reason not to book a room on the 12th floor. If you go after 5:30 in the off-season, after management has gone home, several of the security guards are usually happy to tell ghost stories if there's nothing else going on for them to deal with. Whether they can show you the ballrooms depends on A, whether there's a function going on in them, or B, whether the staff likes you. So be polite. For best results, be upfront, make it clear that you're interested in the history of the buildings, not just the paranormal stuff, and be friendly. Do not just go sneaking around or hiding out in the ballrooms, or you'll be asked to leave. Reputable ghost hunters don't go sneaking around in places when they could get proper permission, even though I must admit that it can take some of the fun out of the things. So that one actually was a lot longer than I expected it to be, and kind of had multiple parts in it. So we're going to leave it at that one for the night. I will say, I've had some spooky encounters, but honestly, Michelle would be the best one to have on to talk about that, because she's worked at a hotel for so many years, and like the things that she's seen over the years between the living and those that have departed this world has been absolutely wild. So maybe I'll have her on to talk about some of her crazy experiences with the paranormal at the hotel she works at. Because honestly, like, they make such good stories. And it's part of the reason why I chose the Congress Hotel, is because hotels have been around for so long and have so many like people from different walks of life coming in and out of them. And, you know, everyone imprints an energy on a place. And that in it of itself really speaks volumes. But I want to take a moment and thank everyone for sticking around and listening. It means the world to me, and I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. All right. Bye, guys.